Hi, we're Diamond and Silk, and we love the Naked Truth Report.
Warning, the following program has been rated T for truth.
You can't handle the truth.
Oh, we think you can. Welcome to the Naked Truth Report with your host, truth warrior and mythbuster Kathleen Wells. The place where we distinguish fact from fiction, where data is used to drive points home, and where Kathleen takes the position that Democrats and black politicians have destroyed black America. Welcome to the Naked Truth Report. Now, your host, Kathleen Wells.
Welcome to the Naked Truth Report. I'm your host, Kathleen Wells. I'm glad you're here. What is the first thing I want to talk about? Let's see. I want to mention that, Biden said that he's going to extend the eviction moratoriums to July. So you guys know, this is something that I want to complain about, but I want to complain about it because it's worth complaining about. That you guys know my tenant, the last time he paid rent was December 2019, right? He owes more than $43,000. So I applied for the Emergency Renters Association, the Emergency Renters Program, which is through the state because of the federal funds that were given to the state. And I applied the first day, which was March 30th. And then I had to get my tenant up to apply, and he applied in mid-April. I applied the first day, March 30th. He applied in mid-April. And he didn't have the proper documentation, so he actually, in fact, I have a point person at the housing department. His name is George. So I've been complaining and angry, hey, I'm angry about it, no kidding. But I don't feel that bad about it because I know a lot of landlords are going through the same stuff. So it's not like just me. Anyway, I had George at the housing department call my tenant because my tenant didn't have the proper documentation. And he informed my tenant that he could go into the housing office and make an oral attestation as to whatever is necessary. So he did that in mid-April. So last week I got an email. Last week was mid-June, right? I get an email from the folks that said that, and it says that you're not priority. Your tenant is not the priority yet. He's not priority eligibility yet because we want tenants who fall within the 30%. They fall within 30% of the median income in the neighborhood. They have to make 30% or less of the median income in that neighborhood. And my tenant doesn't fall within that. So he's not the priority. So my attitude naturally is like, why is the tenant's financial status the determining factor? I would think the landlord's financial status and circumstances would be a determining factor whether or not they were a priority. But anyway, my tenant may go into the next batch. I think the next batch will be 50%. So he may fall within that, but we don't know. I don't know what's going on. And they just expect you to wait. In other words, I've been not getting rental income for over a year and a half. And it's like, just think of how other landlords, I just don't want to think about me because I'm okay, but I would like to have that money, yes. But I think of other landlords that are in worse predicaments than myself. I just wanted to say that. The other thing I want to mention is that Gateway Pundit is announcing that the Arizona audit, at least the paper ballot, one aspect of the Arizona audit has been completed. I think it's the paper ballots. And therefore, a preliminary report is due maybe as soon as tomorrow. And I listened to Steve Bannon on Rumble, the War Room, and he has had Boris Epstein and Peter Navarro on there, and they're talking about that. And the folks at the Gateway Pundit are saying that it's going to be like this preliminary report is going to be explosive. It's going to be explosive. That's a good thing. Let's hope. We've been Hey, listen, folks. We're waiting on what? The Durham report. We've been told. We've been waiting and wishing and hoping, right, that something will be definitive and determinative and make a difference. And we're waiting. So let's hope that this matters. But we know we had Mike Lindell on the show, and we know what? That he's going to file that quo warranto pro action in July. We know Mike Lindell will not let us down, right? But the issue is, what will the Supreme Court do? That's something that we are going to find out. Anyway, I see my guest is on the phone. Yes, I have a guest today, and it's Robert Patillo. Robert Patillo is a civil rights and human rights attorney. He's also a radio host. He appears frequently on Fox News. In fact, I saw a recent video of him on with Tucker Carlson. Robert Patillo is his name. He's a radio show host. I said that. He's a political commentator. And I wanted to have him on because he had me on his show this morning. And you guys know that I've been wanting to have a black Democrat, to explain why black folks are still rolling with the Democratic Party. Well, Robert isn't necessarily a Democrat. He says he's an independent. The way I got turned on to Robert was because I was on one of his Facebook threads. I have one Facebook page. You guys know I was blocked on all the others, right? I have one page. Well, maybe I have two. I think I have the Naked Truth Report page, and then I have the Kathleen Wells. I just have a few folks on that page because of that my old page was deactivated. Anyway, I was on Robert's thread, and we were discussing, I don't know what we were discussing, but he'll remind me. But I was on his radio show this afternoon. And so I thought, fair play, have him on my show. So, Robert, welcome to the Naked Truth Report.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. Thanks for coming on earlier.
You're very, very welcome. So let's continue the conversation that we had on your show. And in fact, I'm going to, I have my I call my listeners truth warriors. And when we come back from the break at the half hour, I'm going to have them call in and ask you questions because I've been wanting for so long to have a black person on the show, a black American. You are a black American, right?
That is correct.
Okay,
I'm black, y'all. I'm black, y'all. I'm bliggity black, y'all.
I've been wanting to have a black American who supports the policies or some of them, because you say you're independent, you support some of the policies of the Democrats on the show for so long. And I know my truth warriors also have some questions for you. So tell us in fact, I'll ask you the question that you posed when I was speaking with you this afternoon. Why do you feel that the legislation proposed by the Democratic Party, that bill regarding, it's named after John Lewis, and it pertains to voter suppression, and then the other bill regarding police brutality, why do you think those two pieces of legislation are beneficial for Black America?
Well, okay, let's take those in turn. So let's take the George Floyd police reform bill, which is currently being stalled in Congress by GOP senators. It's nearly identical to the Justice Act, which was proposed by Tim Scott last year, many of the same provisions. The only difference is the George Floyd Police Reform Act includes a end of qualified immunity for police officers. What is qualified immunity? So I'm a lawyer. If I commit a crime while in the practice of law that results in injury to my client, I have to pay them. They can sue me for malpractice. If a doctor commits a crime or commits a tort while they're practicing medicine, you can sue them for malpractice, and they will personally have to pay you. For police officers, if they commit a crime or a tort during their exercise of their duties as a police officer, the taxpayers have to pay off their debts for them. That is what qualified immunity is, and that's what is included in that act. I think most people will agree that if you have a bad cop on the force, you should not be able to pawn that off on taxpayers. We've seen in Chicago nearly $1 billion spent over the course of the last decade on settlements. We've seen Breonna Taylor's case, $27 million paid out to the family from the taxpayers, not a penny from the officers who did it. We've seen this over and over again. So this idea that we're protecting bad cops from having to pay off their debts, I think that's what most Americans can't get in line with. And the fact that you cannot get not one single Republican, not one, to vote in favor of that is why you see so few African Americans being willing to cross the aisle when there's already that stigma associated with it. Secondarily, on the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, in addition to the For the People Act, there's many things in there that will expand democracy. You have to look at the numbers. Republicans have not won the popular vote in America in the last 17 years in a presidential election. Indeed, in the last 32 years, since George H.W. Bush, the Republicans have won the popular vote a grand total of once. That was in 2004. So they no longer are even attempting to get the majority of the votes. We heard statements from Ted Cruz, from Donald Trump, from the Speaker of the House in Georgia, David Ralston, all saying that if everyone is allowed to vote, Republicans will never be able to win an election again. The Senate right now is split 50-50, where you have 50 Republicans and 50 Democrats. But those 50 Democratic senators represent 41 million more people. That's an entire state of California, more than the Republicans in the Senate right now. So when you're looking at the numbers, Republicans are doing everything they can to limit the number of people who can vote, and that's why they make up things like, oh, it's all fraudulent, it's illegal immigrants, it's dead people voting, because they don't like those numbers. What Republicans should be doing is putting in policies that more people like, and that's how you get more people to vote for you. Instead, where we're seeing, where I'm from in Georgia, a voter suppression bill being pushed, Texas, another voter suppression law, Florida, 43 states have introduced voter suppression laws to reduce the number of people who are voting as opposed to expanding the number of people who vote. So when you look at things like that, it's hard to see where the legislative agenda is that is benefiting African Americans. Where is limiting the number of people or making it harder for people to vote helping black folks? Where is making it more difficult to hold police accountable for torts or for crimes they commit helpful for black people? So it's not as if they're this Bengalian logic which is keeping black people wed to the Democratic Party. It's simply a legislative agenda, because if you look back when the legislative agenda was in favor of Republicans, when they were pushing for integration, when they were pushing for business back in the 30s and 40s, and when the Democrats were the Democrat parties, a party of Strom Thurmond's, black folks voted for Republicans. So I think it's more a legislative issue than any kind of social or cultural issue.
Well, you talk really good. You sound like a Democrat to me.
Like I said, I just follow the policy. It's a policy-related question, so we have to have a policy-related answer.
Oh, okay. Well, see, this is my response to everything you said. These are titles. This is a narrative. These are words and titles. When you use the word voter suppression, see, that's a title. Let's see. Biden says he's gotten 81 million votes. Trump got 76 million votes. These are the most votes ever in the history of voting. So where do you see voter suppression? Where? You know what I'm saying?
Do you want to hear voter suppression where it exists? Because I'm from Georgia, so I can explain completely.
Okay.
So in 1997, Georgia passed a voter suppression law, which was the first time in Georgia state history they required identification at the polls. They reduced the number of polling locations, etc. So from 1872 until when that law was implemented in 2002, so it was passed in 1997, but was really put into place for the 2002 election. So from 1872 until 2002, there were 0 Republicans elected to governor in the state of Georgia. After that law was put into place in 2002, every single governor has been a Republican. Georgia bit back at the apple again in 2005. They passed a law saying that you have to have a government-issued photo ID or you have to pay a $25 fee to get that ID from the government. That law was put into was challenged in the Supreme Court. It was struck down as a poll tax, as in Georgia had a poll tax 15 years ago. And they reformed the law to take the fee away. But since that law was passed and put into effect for the 2010 election, back in 2006, you had people like Thurber Baker, who won as a black Democrat, who won statewide with 60% of the vote. Michael Thurman won statewide, 57% of the vote. 5 of the 8 statewide officials were actually Democratic officials in the state. After the law went into effect, you did not have a single Democrat or African American elected statewide for 11 years. So when you're looking at a state like Georgia, which is 35% African American, 15% Latino, 6% Asian, 54% women, we're one of the largest LGBTQ populations in the entire country, the fact that you did not have a single African American or Democrat elected statewide from the year 2010 until 2021 shows that there are legislative mechanisms put in place to make it more difficult for African Americans to vote, because you're seeing a disproportionate voter share for people who do not represent those districts. So when we talk about voter suppression, it's not an imaginary thing. It's a mathematical thing. It's something that you can look at directly, and you can see the numbers and how they correlate, and the differences in elections to the period prior to the time when those laws were put into place versus after they were put into place, versus these claims of voter fraud that many people are, they're doing recounts and all. There's literally no evidence that you can point to. It's like if someone will say, well, I saw a video on YouTube and somebody had a briefcase, so I think there was voter fraud. That's different than the evidence for voter suppression, where we have 3 years of testimony in the state of Georgia at senatorial hearings leading into this. The reason the Justice Department is suing the state of Georgia over its new voter suppression law because it violates the holding the 1977 Supreme Court case, Village of Arlington versus the state, which lays out a 3-part test to determine when voter suppression is present, and which goes back to the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which determines
Take a breath. Take a breath.
Can claim those things.
Robert, take a breath.
It's a lot of information to get out there, and I think because there's so much fake news out there, people aren't used to hearing cases and citations and numbers, because those are actual proof, and then you get distracted by a lot of distractions, and they say, well, I heard some guy on TV say there was something wrong, but there are actual cases of voter suppression we have to fight against, and it's something you can look up very clearly in the math. It's not histrionics, it's just math.
Okay, let's back up a little bit. Did you use the date 1897 or something like that?
I said from 1872 until 2002, there was not a single Republican elected the governor in the state of Georgia.
Well,
after
wait. Slow down there.
There wasn't a single Republican after that.
Wait, so in other words, Georgia was voting Democrat from 1872, right?
Correct, until 2002.
Okay, exactly. Because why? They were voting for a Democrat governor, right? Right after
Correct.
Reconstruction.
Mm-hmm.
Right after Reconstruction. Because the South was dominated by Democrats. They were pro-slavery in Georgia. And they were Democrats. So, of course, a Republican couldn't get voted. If they were suppressing any votes, they were suppressing Republican votes. If a Republican governor couldn't get elected.
But see, this is always my question when people cite back to the post-Reconstruction era, as you did, because the Republicans during that period of time had a very different agenda than Republicans have now. March 11th, 1867, Thaddeus Stevens, the Republican representative from the state of Vermont, passed House Resolution 29, which guaranteed reparations to every formerly enslaved individual in the United States, 40 acres, and actually instead of a mule, it was $50 in order to construct a hut, as was articulated in the legislation, to be taken from the estates of seized property from former Confederates. So why is it that the Republican Party of today doesn't believe in what the Republican Party believed in 1867, but they still want to hold the Democratic Party of today to what happened in the 1860s and 1870s? No,
well, okay, let's go over this, because I just went over this in my Hillsdale College free online course. I love those courses because the details matter. You talk really fast, you get a lot in there. I know you know what you're talking about, but let's slow down a little bit and back up, because the Democratic Party was, and still is, actually, All of their policies have been against Black Americans. It was during slavery, before slavery, post-Reconstruction, and now, today. They haven't changed at all. The policies coming out of the Democrat Party have not benefited Black Americans. If they have benefited Black Americans, Black America wouldn't be facing zero median wealth by 2053. Even right there in your state, Atlanta, they have reduced the home ownership to 25%, and voting Democrat for 5, 6, and 7 decades. So if something has been, it's clear. If something benefits someone, you see them benefiting. You go from 80% two-parent families in the 1920s to now 80% one-parent families in the 2021s. That's not beneficial to Americans or Black Americans. The family is the most important institution in society. And I listened to the guy that called in after me. I think his name was Todd. And he was talking about how talking about the fact that I said two-parent families is essential and necessary. He felt that wasn't a big deal. It is the biggest deal, two-parent families. All indices, all data point to not having a father in the home is why people are losing their wealth, is why boys are going to prison and massively incarcerated. The policies of the Democratic Party defunding the police is causing more incarceration of Black men. Hating police is causing more. So in other words, you talk about mass incarceration, Michelle Alexander's book, and yet your policies create more incarceration. Does that make sense?
No, because there's no data showing that. What data shows that defunding the police causes more incarceration? What causes more incarceration are things such as the war on drugs, which is
wait, slow down. Okay, I'll let you finish. And a lot of people are calling in, so I'm going to let you finish, and I'm going to let my callers respond to you. I'm not going to say anything. I'm going to let you have the whole floor. Go.
Well, one, going back to your initial point, my point is if you're going to hold Democrats to the same standard you held them to in the 1860s, why are Republicans not held to the same standards they believed in the 1860s when it was the radical Republican Reconstruction? Republicans should be leading the charge on reparations. Republicans should be leading the charge on providing more property and more resources for African-American communities because that's what they believed in the 1860s and 1870s all the way through the Reconstruction period. What policies are we talking about that are taking fathers out of the home where you can blame Democrats for fatherlessness when you're not talking about Nixon and the war on crime? We're talking about Reagan and the war on drugs. We're not talking about much of the mass incarceration that took place in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, which led us to this place. How can we not talk about the failed war on drugs and the war on poverty, war on crime, which ended up simply being wars on Black people for the better part of the last half century when we're talking about many of these externalities? So
let me respond.
Problem, but we're not talking about the solution.
Okay, I have a break now, Robert. When we come back from the break, I'm going to respond to what you just said, and then we'll take phone calls. Are you open to taking phone calls?
Sure thing.
Okay, sounds good. We'll be right back. The war on poverty was LBJ, a Democrat. We'll be right back. I'm speaking to Robert Patillo, who is a lawyer, a civil rights and human rights activist, and he has a talk show, a radio show. I was on his radio show this afternoon. It's out of Atlanta. You got to check it out. Robert Patillo. He's also on Fox News, frequently a couple of political commentary. He sounds like a Democrat to me, but he doesn't want to admit it. We'll be right back.
Kathleen Wells, the host of the Naked Truth Report, wants to hear from you. Just like our borders, the phone lines, well, they're wide open. Call in at 866-870-KRLA. That's 866-870-5752. 866-870-KRLA.
Welcome back to the Naked Truth Report. We're speaking, my guest is Robert Patillo, who is a human rights and civil rights attorney in Atlanta. He also has a radio show there. And I was on his show this afternoon. And let's talk about a few things that he brought up. You brought up the fact that Republicans have not been consistent from Reconstruction period to today. But what I'm saying is that, Trump did offer Black Americans $500 billion and 500,000 new Black businesses, but most Blacks didn't believe him. Why? Because they were convinced that Trump was a racist. Why were they convinced that he was a racist? Because the Democratic Party, liberals, the left, the media, convince or tell Black folks that racism is ingrained in our fabric of America, that white supremacy is in all aspects of society. And so therefore, Black folks, many Black folks, hear this, and particularly the young, and they feel that they're a victim of white supremacy. They have a perpetual grievance with the society, with America. They hate white folks because why? Whites are racist. And so therefore, what do? They go out and shoot them, like the Black young man that shot the couple, the Puerto Rican couple in their car. That's increasing martial because that guy will go to prison, right? There was a woman, a Black woman, that shot at a police officer or pointed a gun at a police officer in her car, and he killed her. Yes. Why would she do that? Oh, because she hates cops, because Democrats, the policy, the mantra, the narrative that the Democratic Party pushes and pushes in the media and with celebrities on social media is that racism is ingrained in the fabric of America. White people are hateful. White people are racist. Trump is a racist. And so Black folks, you should hate them and you should have a perpetual grievance with these white folks. So go out and, you heard Maxine Waters, right? What did she say? Get in their face. That's assault. Get in their face. When you talk to people like this, they will be angry. I suspect that most are angry because they don't have money and they don't have fathers. And why don't they have fathers? Because for decades, starting in the late 60s, early 70s, the whole narrative, the whole climate that was pushed by the left, by liberals, was free sex feminism. It was on the TV. It was on the radio show. Be free. Be liberated sexually. And so everyone went out and did that. Most folks, young folks did that. Conservatives believe in traditional marriage. Conservatives believe, and the founding fathers believed in these things, you see. They believed that for a society to remain free, the citizens must be knowledgeable and virtuous. They believed in the founding fathers pushed two-parent families for the benefit of the children. They talked about that in their primary documents of the founding of the nation. How did we get away from that? Liberal policies, free sex feminism, casual sex. Do you understand? Do you get it, Robert?
Are you talking about Sally Hemings when you're talking about the founding fathers and them being against sexual proclivity? Or are you talking about Ona Jacobs Washington and George Washington? Or are we talking about Benjamin Franklin in France with all those hookers and stuff? Is that what we're talking about?
Well, I want to say this about Thomas Jefferson. You do know that Thomas Jefferson wanted to include in the Constitution that the issue of slavery was imposed upon us by King George III. He also proposed in the Northwest Ordinance, the 4 original documents that are the foundation of America include the Northwest Ordinance, and that ordinance was written by Thomas Jefferson. And he wanted to include, the Northwest Ordinance prohibited slavery in the Northwest Territory. He wanted to include that slavery would be prohibited in all states, but he didn't get the votes for it because New Jersey was the state that didn't give him the majority to include prohibiting slavery in all states. Also, the issue about Sally Hemings, it's not so. They got the DNA from one of Sally Hemings' relative. and it's not, there is a trace back to one of Jefferson's fathers, and it's not clear as to whether or not Jefferson was the father of one or more of her children, or Jefferson's brother, because the brother was frequently on the territory, and he was there at that time when she supposedly got pregnant. So we don't know definitively that Thomas Jefferson is the father of Sally Hemings' children, one or more. It could have been his brother because of the lineal link to the paternal side of Jefferson's family. Also, in all the primary documents, which I know most black folks haven't read, all the founding fathers talked about the evils of slavery, and they felt that it was something that was imposed on America by George III, and that it would eventually go away. And this is why they prohibited it in the Northwest territories that were becoming a part of the Union, or new territories that were being adopted. But Jefferson wanted to prohibit all slavery in all states. He wasn't able to pass that in the Northwest Ordinance. And that's why it's important to know these details, you see. And we don't...
But see, the issue you run into is that those are a lot of, hopes and maybes, but he could have just released all his slaves whenever he felt like it. He could have woke up on any random Tuesday and said, everybody can go home and be free, and here's some money to be free. He chose not to do it. George Washington was one of the most vicious slave hunters in Virginia. One of his enslaved women, Ona Judge, escaped, and he chased her all the way to New Hampshire. Then he chased her to Canada. And then in the 1830s, they did an interview with her, and they said, well, you could have lived a life of luxury living with George Washington. Why did you choose to be free but be poor? She died penniless. All of her children predeceased her. Her husband predeceased her. She said, I would rather die penniless free than live in luxury as a slave. I don't think we can just paper over.
She was living. Well, no, but context is everything. And in fact, one of George Washington's nephew was a judge who wrote the dissent in I think it was Dred Scott case. He was so everything, you have to put things in proper perspective. Context is everything, and slavery was something that was. You have to put it in proper context, and you have to know the full story. You don't judge a man by one story. You take the full story of a man. I'm sure there are things about you that we could people could gossip about and say, oh, why didn't you do this? Or why didn't you do that? You see, this is the thing, human nature is complex. And you've got to know the full story. And you can't listen. I'll tell you something. Don't you think folks 150 years from now will be judged for having abortions? They'll be judged harshly for having abortions 150 years from now, don't you think? What kind of people has an abortion?
I think that's different than owning 357 human beings at the time that you die.
But listen, slavery started in Africa. Nigerian slaves buried their slaves alive. But for Africans, slavery started with Arabs and Africans. And but for Africans selling their slaves to Americans or Europeans, there would be no slavery. They started the whole business. So we have to we have to look at human nature, the nature of humans. And this is why... Go ahead.
Doesn't the word slave come from the Slavic people, as in Eastern Europeans who were enslaved by Western Europeans?
And therefore?
You're saying slavery started in Africa, but the word comes from Eastern Europeans. It seems that it's more so derivative of the conquest of Western Europeans over Eastern Europeans and the enslavement of those people and nothing to do with Africans.
Well, there's an article in the New Yorker called "My Great Great Grandfather, the Nigerian Slave Trader" in the New Yorker. I suggest you read it. But anyway, let's take a call now we're going to take some phone calls. Let's take a call now from Pascal in Santa Monica. Hi, Pascal. Welcome to the Naked Truth Report.
Catherine, thank you so much. And I want to say you're both very loving, lovable people. And I hear the compassion from both of you. So I want to applaud you and never give up the search for truth. And just a simple aside, though, is one of the biggest flaws with modern conversations is character assassination. If we don't agree with something, we attack the messenger. And I think that is so unhealthy in terms of having good decision making and being able to make the best decisions for our country. So that being said, thank you both. And I want to say a whole bunch of things, but you're probably not going to give me that much time. But I did have two questions for the guest, and I wanted to encourage him to keep studying because I think he has a good heart, very good heart. And my two questions were about the undocumented aliens or the illegal aliens being given driver's license. I've heard this on the news from fairly reputable sources that in some states they get driver's license. As a matter of fact, I've met a few that told me they get driver's licenses. It's more complicated than that, but now I'm worried about if they're going to get the right to vote because all you need is a driver's license ID. And then I wanted to ask the guest if he could explain the weighted race bias. I just learned it from Dr. Shiva Ayaduri, and it's in all, that feature is in all, like the dialogue.
Oh, Pascal, that's enough. Let's just stick with illegal aliens getting driver's license. Okay, Pascal, thanks. Okay.
Is that good enough? Listen.
Yeah. Okay, Robert. He wants to know your thoughts about illegal aliens getting driver's license.
Well, I'm a Christian. I'm a Southern Baptist, and I don't think God created a single human being that is illegal. I don't think anyone can be a Christian and truly be devout to their ministry and believe that a human being can be illegal. Now, we're saying that somebody doesn't have the paperwork we would like them to have. That's one thing. So we're saying that people without the proper paperwork should not have driver's licenses. I think we get into some sticky externalities, which is that, okay, they're here. They need to take their children to school, and they need to take their children to work. We would want them to have car insurance while they're doing so. We want them to be able to drive back and forth. I think this idea that we're going to starve them out of the country, I think it's an antiquated model. So I don't see what the issue will be with them having driver's licenses while they work on getting the proper paperwork and documentation, because quite frankly, they're what's holding up our Social Security and Medicare system. Their wages, in large part, are what allow for us to have the standard of living that we have in this country, because if you had to pay somebody $15 an hour like they're doing to fight with 15 or more in order to pick strawberries or avocados, then none of us will actually be able to afford them. So I think we have to be more compassionate when we're thinking about human rights when it comes to these issues of documentation, and also have a comprehensive immigration reform package put in place where we're not simply continuing to demonize people for documentation issues, and we're actually making it easier for people to get citizenship within the country so their documentation can be correct.
Well, the Bible says that your
Catherine, that wasn't my point, though.
Oh, Pascal, I have so many calls. Pascal, I know. But Pascal, let's go to the next call. I have so many calls. But I want to say that, and he was concerned about them being able to vote with a driver's license. In California, if you get a driver's license, they immediately register you to vote. But the issue is the Bible says that the country is your home, and you shouldn't let strangers in. And we call people criminals. You have a problem with calling someone a criminal?
I think we have to. I do think we have to redefine what crime is in this country, because right now, walking across the street at the wrong location is a crime. We call ourselves the home of the free, or the land of the free and the home of the brave. But what we run into, we are one of the most criminalized societies on earth. if you travel internationally a lot, you'll see that people don't even understand the municipal codes that we have in America, let alone the state codes, let alone the federal codes. So we have to start decriminalizing a big portion of American society where we don't have to continuously live in fear of federal imprisonment at the turn of every hat. If we really believe in freedom and justice and liberty, then we should enshrine that in the law. There should be no reason you should have to pay somebody thousands of dollars, a lawyer, in order to understand what the law is.
Well, if you don't have law and order,
everyone to do that.
Well, if you don't have law and order, you have anarchy. You must have a society.
No one said anything about not having law and order, but if I want to plant a tree in my front yard, I should not have to file some paperwork with the county to plant a tree in my front yard. We have the most overly litigated and criminalized society on earth. We have to restore freedom and liberty and stop having the government standing over us with a thumb on everything that we do.
Well, that's the thing, that the Democrats have imposed all these regulations and the administrative state. In fact, starting with 1970, or with Woodrow Wilson, that's when the administrative state started. So all these regulations and this administrative state and establishment folks stuff was started by progressives. Conservatives want.
I don't think anybody will call Woodrow Wilson a progressive.
Oh yeah, see, this is why you must take the course, the Hillsdale College course. He's the first. Him and Theodore Roosevelt were Theodore Roosevelt, but Woodrow Wilson enacted most of the progressive. He's the first progressive that expanded. He was a PhD. He was a president of Princeton University. He talked about being a progressive. Yes. Anyway, let's go to.
Go ahead.
He's what I'm saying, he's a self-described progressive.
I would say that Woodrow Wilson talks about being progressive. Theodore Roosevelt was an actual progressive, somebody who cared about the environment, expanded national parks, busted trust. Everything Woodrow Wilson did was be described in the modern context of being extremely conservative.
Well, I don't know about that, but Theodore Roosevelt was actually a Republican. He
was, but those titles don't mean much in reality. I don't think Theodore Roosevelt would be very welcome in the modern Republican Party. I don't think Woodrow Wilson will be welcome in the modern Democratic Party.
Okay, let's take a call now from Rick in Virginia. Oh, you're not in Virginia. Maybe you are in Virginia. Hi, Rick. Welcome to the Naked Truth Report.
Hello, Miss Kathleen. How are you doing today?
Good.
Yes, I want to get on. I just want to ask Mr. Robert about the voter ID. I don't have a problem with that at all. I mean, how you oppressing people when you're asking for an ID?
Repeat that again.
Hello.
Yeah, repeat it.
I was saying, I want to ask Mr. Robert about the voter ID.
Right.
I don't see a problem with that. Yeah. Okay.
Not
only,
Okay, Rick, thanks. He says he doesn't have a problem with voter ID. What's the problem with voter ID?
The problem with voter ID is that when George Washington was elected president, not one single person had to have a voter ID. So if you believe in the Constitution, if you believe that the Constitution and the First and Second and the first 10 amendments are your ID in this nation, but by nature of being an American citizen, we should not be in a country that everywhere you walk around, we say, show me your papers in order to do every part of American life. In order to institute voter ID, we need to have a constitutional amendment to do so. We have to amend the Constitution to require such. And I think that if we're willing to do that, then by all means, we go through the Constitutional Convention and we do things the right way. But this kind of haphazard, knee-jerk effort to do so, I think violates our fundamental founding principles, as I said, about freedom and liberty and not being part of this great Soviet administrative state that says you have to show your papers for everything you do in American society, that we still want to be the free country that our founders believed in. Part of that is saying that if you want to institute a new ID requirement to exercise a constitutional right, then that has to be done by a constitutional amendment, not simply by judicial fiat. Because right now, think about it. If they can require you to have a photo ID in order to vote, why can't they require a photo ID in order to exercise their Second Amendment rights to keep and bear arms? Why can't they require a Second Amendment photo ID in order for you to go to church? under the freedom of religion? Why can't they require a photo ID in order for you to have freedom of assembly? Why can't they require a photo ID for you to have freedom of speech? For us to have this conversation right now to show our papers to a government agent to allow us to have that. So I think for constitutional rights that are fundamental, you have to amend the Constitution, not simply pass it on a haphazard basis.
Mm-hmm. Okay, let's take a call now from Mike in El Segundo. Hi, Mike. Welcome to the Naked Truth Report.
Hi, Kathleen. I can tell you got a lawyer on for a guest because he's trying to pull the wool over the eyes of everyone. It's just incredible. This idea that that you can't have voter ID without amending the Constitution. The Constitution gives the states the rights to determine how they run the elections. Obviously, we have to have a way to make sure voters don't vote more than once. Otherwise, they're violating the rights of other voters to have their votes counted equally. And also, the Democrat Party is, and always has been, is to this day, the party of slavery, the party of Jim Crow, the party of racism and white supremacy. Just like gun control, the Democrat Party keeps enacting more and more Jim Crow gun control laws. So they did that to keep the slaves under control, and they're doing it now again because ultimately the Democrat Party is on a trajectory to create, and this emerging now, is an emerging Marxist dictatorship. The Democrat Party today is a party that wants to bring back slavery, not just for black people, but for everyone. And it's just incredible. That's why the Democrat Party keeps trying to get more and more power any way they can by stealing elections, by violating the Constitution, just like the unconstitutional impeachment of Donald Trump, by using the government and taxpayers' money to campaign against Republicans, especially Donald Trump, and to undermine his reelection. I mean, everything we've seen, the Democrat Party is all about two things. One is accumulating unlimited power to have their dictatorship, and number two, to abuse that power to steal everything from everyone, to steal everyone's money, their property, and their freedom.
Okay, Mike, thanks a lot. Let's have Robert respond. Hello, Robert. Oh, hi, Robert.
Sorry, dropped the phone for a second.
Okay.
I will tell you, it's always interesting to me that we have these broad proclamations, but they don't have any basis in law or in fact or reality. So let's take, for example, this idea that Democrats are ones trying to take away gun rights. It was Donald Trump and his administration that banned bump stocks, for example, which is just a firearm accessory, but they declared a piece of plastic to be a machine gun and confiscated every single one in the country and had them destroyed. It was Donald Trump's ATF that went after pistol braces, which many people use as a firearm accessory to be able to fire a shortened, large caliber pistol with one hand. Donald Trump's ATF tried to make that illegal, to turn millions of legal firearms owners into felons by judicial fiat. It was Donald Trump and his ATF which went after large, high-capacity magazines, for example. So there's a rhetoric around these things that don't match the policy prescriptions associated therewith. And I think that many people just created this idea in their minds that anything that has the word Democrat attached to them, to it, they hate it, and they call it liberal, and then we start throwing out Marxism, which doesn't make sense because it's a socioeconomic theory. But I think we have to look at the actual policy prescriptions and stop wearing the jerseys and stop wearing mascots around and actually look at what people are actually doing.
Well, this is what people are actually doing. I'm here in Los Angeles, and we know that illegal aliens adversely impact Black Americans. We know the data. So I don't know why you deny that. We know.
Look, let me respond to that. Okay, yeah. For one, I want people to understand this very clearly. African Americans have been in this country since 1619. That first ship came over and brought us here. I am not competing against somebody who just walked across the border from Guatemala for the right to pick somebody's strawberries.
Wait. Stop there. So, listen, no. Let me say this because I want to get this out so you can understand that illegal aliens are not. You think there's enough strawberries and vegetables for all these illegal aliens to pick? We have over 12 million. And you think we think there's enough vegetables for 12 million illegal aliens to pick?
No, my point is that as African Americans, the person that I'm competing with is in that C-suite.
The Black American men need construction jobs, okay? And
Black American men need CEO jobs.
No, they don't need. They need all jobs. They need.
I want to have every single right allotted to me as an American. I refuse to be sitting in the back as a second-class citizen. Don't tell me I need to be competing with somebody from Guatemala or from Nicaragua.
That is
I'm competing with the same people who were here in 1619.
Roberto, that is not Robert.
I'm in competition at the top, not the bottom.
But there are black men that, listen, we cover the entire gamut. Black men need all jobs. Some men do construction. There's nothing wrong with construction work. There's nothing, in fact, there's dignity in working with your hands, okay? Some of the best builders are Africans in Egypt or wherever, right? So there's nothing wrong working with your hands. Don't denigrate construction work.
I'm not denigrating construction work. My point is that people try to put black folks in competition with illegal immigrants saying they're taking our jobs. My point is that's not my job. If you want to go do that, that is on you. My competition is right up there with everybody else wearing a suit and a tie and a pocket square. So I want to have policies that help me compete with them, not to keep back people who are trying to come here to work on other parts of the economy.
Not every black man can be a CEO. Anyway, we don't have any more time, but Robert, I want to have you back on because I have a lot of calls. My callers, they want to talk to you. So will you come back on?
Certainly, I'm amazing. Everybody likes talking to me.
Okay, Robert, thank you for being a guest on the Naked Truth Report. We're going to have you back on soon. We may have you, I'll talk to you off air. Thank you very much. We had a lot of callers. I know Robert can talk, right? I can talk. He can talk more than me. We'll be back next week, and it'll be 4th of July. Let's hope we have new information regarding the Arizona audit. We'll be right back next week. Thanks.
America.